What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the SomeWhatSports Podcast. My name is Chris, and it has been too long since I have been joined by the industry's best, two legends of the industry, actually, two titans, as some would say. I missed them, to be honest. I never see their faces in person, but I did miss their voices. At least one of their voices. Jurg, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good as always. I'm back. Took a little week off. Everyone had to recharge the batteries. Dame had a long trip, out in the field, getting some work done for us, trying to get all our sources together. But we're back, boys. Somewhat Sports, Summer 2021. Another episode. Let's go.
Dame.
I'm fantastic. 2 weeks off. It was great. Chris paid me for it. It was great.
We recharge the bodies. We recharge the batteries, actually, if you will. Yeah, but a bunch of stuff happened in the last 2 weeks, but also substantial growth in the subscribers count on YouTube. That's right, we went up a staggering 2 subscribers, which for a small time, brand, that's like 100 to like a normal one. But yeah, we take what we can get, and we appreciate you new subscribers, and we hope that we'll satisfy you with the content coming out. Now, as I said, a plethora of news came out. Free agency occurred, and the draft occurred for the NHL and the NBA. So Jurg, of course, will cover the NHL news.
Yes, sir.
He has a lot to talk about, and we're excited to listen. And then, of course, we'll move on over to the NBA, in which we will talk about some winners of NBA free agency and some losers of NBA free agency, because there was a couple on each side. But that'll be the rundown for this week. And as always, we start off with the best and only the best. Jurg, talk to me. What's good with the NHL? How was the draft? How was free agency?
So a lot has happened since the last time we got to record. So last we left off when we were recording, we had just finished up the Seattle Kraken expansion draft, which, myself and our guest for that episode talking about it, Bars, my boy, we gave the Kraken a good grade. We gave him, I want to say, like a good B to B plus. They had a solid expansion draft. Could have done a little bit more. We were wanting to see more, but of course, that ended up just being the appetizer for what was going to be this offseason. And since then, we've had the NHL draft and free agency. Now, it's so much to unpack. I'm not going to go super in depth with everything. So what I have, since we're doing winners and losers later for the NBA, I got to give the NHL the same type of love. So I have winners and losers for the NHL offseason combined between the draft and free agency, and how teams did. I'm going to go right through quite a few of the teams that I have. Not super deep with all of them, not necessarily in terms of it's not going to be very transaction heavy, but I'm just going to give a general consensus of like who I think it got better this offseason going into what will hopefully be a good 2021-2022 season. Fingers crossed that everything goes, according to plan, considering the troubling reports that we are reading and seeing in recent times. But, we hope for the best. Positive vibes only. Positive vibes, except when Chris and Dame go at each other. Then, the book gets thrown out the window. But moving on from that. So, my winners of the NHL offseason so far. I have the Vegas Golden Knights as one of my winners. I felt they did an outstanding job in the draft, specifically with their second-round pick when they got Daniil Chayka, one of the best defensive defenseman in the draft, best defenseman out of Russia coming into the draft. He actually had like first round talent potential, and the fact that they got him in round 2, that's an outstanding pick. And they just bolstered the depth. Marc Martinez, Laurent Brossoit as the backup goalie now after they traded away Marc-Andre Fleury, controversy abound. But ultimately, they did a good job filling up the roster. They still need that like one final piece, I think, to really become a Stanley Cup champion, but they're still a contender. And in the Pacific Division, which same division with the Seattle Kraken, by the way, Vegas is the odds-on favorite to win it once again, and as they should. They look on paper to be the best team in this division without a doubt. If anyone catches them, it'd be a surprise. But speaking of trying to catch them, the Seattle Kraken in year 1, they're going to be trying to do that. And after about B plus draft expansion draft grade, I gotta say the rest of the offseason for the Kraken has been, I would say, an A minus, maybe even an A. I know Chris is cheering. Dame is slightly annoyed, not because he hates Seattle, just because of his despise of Chris and Chris having enjoyment. So Dame is not happy to hear the Kraken's success.
Absolutely not.
So since the expansion draft, what have the Seattle Kraken done? Well, they had the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft, and with the Buffalo Sabres selecting Owen Power, that happened, by the way. Got that mock draft pick right. The Seattle Kraken got Matty Beniers out of the University of Michigan, one of Power's teammates that got drafted in the first round this year. Beniers, great two-way forward. I think that was an excellent pickup. And then from there, the Kraken continued to fill out the team. They signed Alex Wenberg and Jaden Schwartz to forwards in free agency, both to pretty solid contracts, honestly, when you consider the fact that Seattle, the way they did the expansion draft, looking back, it's like they planned to kind of splurge a little bit in free agency. So when you look back, I honestly think I may have to increase the expansion draft grade to arguably an A-, looking back, considering what they've done since with free agency, and especially them getting the crown jewel of the goalie market in free agency, the best goalie on the market in this class, Phil Grubauer, signed on a 6-year deal with the Kraken. But funny enough, as quickly as that news came, the NHL deemed his contract invalid. Not to make him a free agent again. Grubauer will still be a Seattle Kraken, but the Kraken just had to fix up the salary distribution because they're making it a front-loaded deal in terms of the actual base salary. And they made a mistake there with how they spread out the dollar amount. So a little blip by the Kraken, but they've already reinstated the the paperwork for the NHL. I'm almost certain. I haven't seen the headline yet, but I already know he's still going to be there. So Phil Grubauer headlines the acquisitions for what I would say, honestly, a offseason for the Seattle Kraken as they head into year one, which is a good thing because I personally do want them to be successful, because if they're successful in year one, like, that's just a positive sign for the NHL, and especially, to build a new hockey fan base up there in the Pacific Northwest. Other winners I had this offseason, the Boston Bruins, just overall what they did, filling out the depth. I personally believe they have, you could argue, the best bottom six now in the NHL after the offseason that they put together with some of the signings they had, like Foligno and Haula. And then fixing the goalie situation. So Tuukka Rask getting a surgery. He is still currently a free agent. Interested to see if anyone takes a risk on signing him to like a 1-year type deal, because he will be out until like midway through the season, really, with the surgery that he got. So to replace him, they signed Linus Ullmark away from the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo just losing almost everyone this offseason, except for one disgruntled center in particular. But Ullmark, honestly, his stats weren't even that bad for what they should have been in Buffalo. He should have been getting rocked every single night, but he had some very good nights in net. He gets a solid little deal. And the Bruins, by the way, the entry draft, Fabian Lysell, who I had mocked, I think both times I did my mock drafts for our Somewhat Sports WordPress. Make sure you read those articles as they will continue to be pumped out eventually. Yeah, I had Fabian Lysell in the top 10 both times to the Vancouver Canucks, who, funny enough, ended up trading their pick. I'll get to that in a moment. But I had him going in the top 10. He falls to 21. And that really surprised me in the draft. So the fact that the Bruins got a top 10 caliber talent at 21, this kid is an offensive dynamo. Give him a year or two back in the SHL to grow a little bit, and then 1 year here in North America to adjust to the style of play here. The kid is going to be a dynamic player for the Bruins. So the Bruins, they got an absolute steal in the draft. Good for agency. The one negative for their offseason is they lost David Krejci, which, second line center for a long time, one of the rocks of the organization, but he left because he wanted to, kind of reconnect his entire family. He said it himself, like his parents don't speak English and his kids don't speak Czech. So he just wanted to return back to the Czech Republic, and he will finish out his hockey playing career there. And yeah, I mean, good on him. A tough decision to make, all things considered, but he obviously makes it for his family. And of course, the NHL and Boston Bruins fans specifically will miss him because he was a very, talented two-way player. And come the playoffs, he performed well for Boston always. So that's a big loss for them. Question for the Bruins: how will they fill out the second line center role? We will see as this season plays on. Perhaps a trade deadline acquisition this upcoming season in the near future, but that's for a future episode. Let's not give everything away. Moving on, kind of like my final winners here. I like what the Winnipeg Jets did. They had a very good draft. Honestly, you could argue this is what you call efficiency. They only had like 4 or 5 picks in this past draft. I think the team with the least amount of picks, and you could argue they hit on almost every single pick in this draft. The fact that they only had like 4 and they hit on every single one, phenomenal drafting by them. They beefed up the blue line with some acquisitions, and their forward core is solid. They kept Laurie on, I think, a pretty good deal for him, and they got Stastny back for a year. Phenomenal offseason for Winnipeg, who I think they see the Central Division, things could be potentially shaky there, and they're trying to re-solidify themselves as a true playoff team. So big time moves by Winnipeg. And then finally, the Detroit Red Wings and the Tampa Bay Lightning. No big names to either of those organizations, but Steve Yzerman just continues to play the rebuild perfect to a T. He had a great draft. The Red Wings traded up in the draft to select a goalie for the future in Sebastian Cossa, which was curious because, as everyone knows from my mocks, I did not have him as the first goalie off the board at all. So the fact that they picked him is interesting. I personally had him as my number 2, and they picked him as number 1. I would normally question it, but this is actually Steve Yzerman. So you know what? I'm not going to question what that man thinks. I'm really not. If he thinks Sebastian Cossa could be one of the best goalies in the league, dang it, I think I need to start breaking down some more tape of his because if Steve Yzerman sees something, then that means he knows something. So phenomenal offseason there, and also getting Nedeljkovic and P.S. Suter. God damn it, Chicago, why'd you let him go? Just Steve Yzerman continuing to be great, fleecing other teams in the league, as he has been one to do his entire career. And the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions had a pretty good offseason in their own right. They got rid of the Tyler Johnson contract and brought in the Brent Seabrook contract, which means they can put that on long-term injury reserve, which means they're going to play the salary cap again, and everyone is going to get annoyed. And I can't wait for Chris. Chris is slowly discovering more of hockey Twitter. I can't wait for him to look through hockey Twitter and see how everyone reacts to when Brent Seabrook's contract gets put on the long-term injury reserve.
I mean, I'm all for it. I already get enough negativity on NBA Twitter, so NHL Twitter, I'll take it.
I can't wait. I cannot wait. And so, yeah, the Tampa Bay Lightning, it was a worrying offseason at first, but honestly, they've rebounded well, and it looks like they have a good chance. Honestly, my humble opinion, they're my early favorite to three-peat the East, at least. They're my early favorite to win the East for a third straight year. The whole league, we'll see, but at least the Eastern Conference, I don't know if anyone could beat good old Tampa Bay. Now, moving on to my losers of the offseason. They were never Chris's former team, but if he had been a hockey fan before, they probably would have been. But the New York Rangers are one of my losers. To me, they went 0 for 2 on their first 2 draft picks in this past draft. I just did not like where they went. Not to say with their first rounder they didn't pick up a good player, but they didn't pick the right position, and there were still very talented players at the center position that they could have gone, and instead of just getting a winger. So fault there for the Rangers. And then also with free agency, I just didn't like some of these moves. Predominantly trades, really, not even free agents acquisitions by this Rangers team. But Barclay Goodrow, I don't like the idea of overpaying for bottom 6 forwards. Sometimes it can work if you get lucky, but a lot of times it doesn't. And the fact that the New York Rangers, they traded for Goodrow, and then they pay him a hefty contract. This is a 6-year deal worth just under $22 million. That's going to be a tough deal for them to eventually have to get off the books when they'll need to, because they will need to at some point, with the fact that, their young players all of their young pieces within the next 2 to 3 years are going to be due new contracts. And so what they're going to decide from there, I do not envy Chris Drury at all. For high expectations and high hopes that I had, it's kind of faltered a little bit this offseason. Kind of disappointing. Speaking of disappointing offseasons, the Colorado Avalanche, they'll once again be a Stanley Cup contender and favorite for next season, but I just did not like the offseason they had. I liked the Ryan Murray signing for them. It was a nice little 1-year deal. Is a depth defenseman, rounds out the team pretty good, honestly. I think he'll be fine in Colorado. Honestly, being on that blue line, he'll look pretty good. But then the rest of the offseason, they lost Phil Grubauer to the Seattle Kraken, obviously, so they were forced to overpay for Darcy Kemper. They had to trade away a first-round pick for a goalie who I think you could have gotten for less, but because of the way the market played out, they lost out on Linus Ullmark because of the Philip Grubauer choice. It was just unlucky for Colorado there. They also lost Brendan Saad, and they kept... Here's the thing, you would think it's a positive with them keeping the captain, Gabriel Landeskog, but just... I think you could have made the argument that now was the time for him to leave. I think they could have replaced him, whether it was keeping Saad or finding someone else. I'm still kind of bullish on him coming back, mainly on the term, 8 years, $56 million. I like Gabriel Landeskog personally, but the fact that Colorado had to do that, it's going to be interesting because the Nathan MacKinnon contract is, rearing its ugly head in like another year or two. And while McKinnon took a pay cut once, he may do it again, but he's still going to be very, very handsomely paid. So I'm going to be really, really intrigued to see how Colorado handles things. They're a young team. They have great players, but that cup window, which we thought was wide open for a good while, they have to be careful or else it could get almost shut before it even has a chance to be wide open because, again, Colorado's talented, but they haven't won yet, which I'm sure the boys, when we get to NBA free agency, they can make that kind of connection with a team that has a lot of talent but just hasn't won a championship yet and what they'll be doing in the future. The Carolina Hurricanes, big losers to me. They royally screwed up their goalie situation going from Nedeljkovic and Peter Mrazek to Freddie Anderson and Antti Raanta. By the way, they did those moves to quote-unquote save costs. They would have only had to pay their 2 best goalies from last season, Nedeljkovic and Mrazek, They would have only had to pay them $300,000 more dollars a year for a 2-year span than they end up paying now for Anderson and Raanta. So make with that what you will. They also lost Dougie Hamilton and Warren Fogle. Just not a great season for the Hurricanes, where a lot of people were hoping like going into last season, people thought the Hurricanes would challenge Tampa Bay, and as we saw in the playoffs, they got smacked in 5. The year before against Boston, they got smacked in 5, and then the year before that, they got swept in the conference finals. So it's clear to me this is why the Carolina Hurricanes are a good team, sometimes great, but they are not one of the true best in the league, and decisions like this are why that happens, because they just did not have a good free agency. It sucks because I think they had a solid draft, but free agency just was not good for them. And then final run through here, the Pittsburgh Penguins made no upgrades to the goalie position. They need a goalie, or else that team is going to waste the final years of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, which you don't really want to see. But yeah, their goalie situation is terrible. I could put Chris or Dame. I think Chris and Dame together would be a better goalie tandem for the Pittsburgh Penguins next season. And I don't even know what their skating ability is, nor their reflexes, but I'm fully confident the two of them could, suit up for the Penguins in net. So that's how I feel about what they did with goalie, which was absolutely nothing. Good job, Pittsburgh. The Calgary Flames, what does the future hold? Are they going to try to push for the playoffs? Are they going to rebuild? Once again, NBA teams I could ask this question for. Let's see what they do. Just make a decision, Calgary, and stick with it. Like, that's all I'm going to say. I don't think they can win, but just make a decision to placate the fans, just for the love of God. And then the Ottawa Senators. A lot of people, weirdly enough, guys, I want you boys to think of an NBA team just in your mind that they're not a great team, but people have higher expectations of them coming into a season for absolutely no reason. And then you see everything play out as it did. They were not a playoff team last year, not even close, and they're not going to be one this year either. Questionable choice with their first-round draft pick, in my opinion. They could have used it a little bit better. And they just haven't really done anything in free agency either. So at the end of the day, for Ottawa, just going to be another year of rebuilding, and I mean heavy rebuilding. This is year 3, I think, of the rebuild, maybe 4. And this is really starting to feel like a super long-term rebuild when it comes to that. And those were the teams that I give my, immediate opinion on that I'm fairly confident I think will end up playing out that way. I have a couple of in-between teams. I'm not going to go through the decisions like super in-depth with most of them. But the Vancouver Canucks, the Montreal Canadiens, the Edmonton Oilers, so half of Canada's teams, essentially. I'm very 50-50 on some of the decisions they made. I can understand the mindset for a lot of their choices, but the execution, how these guys will perform, how they'll do, will be questionable, especially with the Edmonton Oilers. Like, they made some questionable choices along the blue line with a couple of their acquisitions, and that's really starting to concern me. I'm starting to feel really bad for Connor McDavid. I really, really am. And the Montreal Canadiens, honestly, I think I would be cool with their offseason, but they don't have enough cap space right now to re-sign Jesperi Kotkaniemi at the moment. But I think what they're waiting for is that when the season is officially starting, they're going to put Shea Weber's contract on the long-term injury reserve, or at least they're going to try to, because he's actually going to step away from hockey this year. One of their key pieces to their Stanley Cup final appearance here in 2021, he's going to be stepping away from the game, and he might fully retire. This may have been the final season of his career. We're not sure yet. And if he does, with this season confirmed that he won't be playing, they can put his contract on the injury reserve, get that cap relief, and that's how I think they'll be re-signing Kotkaniemi. So if that happens, I take back the tweener status and I would push them more towards the winner, because I actually do like some of the moves they made. And then the Toronto Maple Leafs, dear Lord, I'm just not a fan of Canada this offseason, huh, boys? They made a couple decent signings, some depth signings I think could help them, but at the end of the day, just win at this point in the playoffs. I'm sick of the decent off seasons, or the good off seasons you actually have. Just win the damn playoff series already and actually make a run in the playoffs, because the clock is ticking on that core. Despite the fact the 3 of the guys are in their prime or about to be in their prime, the clock is slowly ticking considering the contract. So Toronto, there's your warning. And then my last 2 teams, the Florida Panthers, good signings, but were there slight overpayments with Sam Bennett, and maybe could you have waited a year of Carter Verhaeghe? I'm not sure. I think the thing with the Florida Panthers is that they're not going to be a team that attracts a lot of high-name free agents, except for the once in a blue moon signing like a Sergei Bobrovsky. But look at how that signing has ended up for them so far. We're already talking about wanting to trade him after 2 years. So it's not good, especially when you pay a guy that much money. So we'll see what happens with Florida. I think they'll still be a solid team next year, playoff contender, no doubt. And then the biggest enigma, boys, for this 2021 NHL offseason, the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, on paper, they got better. The trade for Ryan Ellis was a steal. I think he's going to be phenomenal for them. Keith Yandel was a nice depth signing after the Panthers bought him out. And I think actually trading for Cam Atkinson and unloading Voracek was good. Saved just about $3 million of cap space with that move. And I think it was a really nice hockey deal. But the Rasmus Ristolainen trade is going to be interesting. Essentially, guys, in 2 different deals, in order to free up space and eventually get him, they had to give up a first-round pick and 2 second-round picks and one of their now former main roster defensemen in order to acquire him. And he's only got a year left, so it's going to be pressure on Philly to offer him a contract extension here soon. So I'm going to be interested to see how that helps them. They have to figure out the cap situation for the rest of the summer because they need to re-sign their young stud Carter Hart. I say young stud even after his down year because I still have faith in him. I think he could be a great goalie, but they need to figure out a way to re-sign him on a manageable deal and figure out the contracts going forward on this team. But aside from that, that's the main players that I have winning, losing, or I'm somewhere in the middle on this 2021 NHL offseason. I guess overall, how would I say it? Very active. I think this was one of the most highly entertaining off seasons we've had in a couple of years. I would say it's probably been the most since I forget if it was all in one summer or was it back-to-back summers when John Tavares went to Toronto, when Steven Stamkos resigned, when PK Subban was traded, when Taylor Hall was traded. Like those summers were very active in the middle of the 2010s, and it's been a couple years since we had a real offseason like that. This was as close as we gotten since, and I was just a fan of it. So overall, nice offseason the NHL had going in, big names going to new places, teams are trying to gear up. I think it's going to be a very nice year going into year one of the ESPN and TNT deals that they have. I'm super excited for what this upcoming NHL season will do. We'll do a 2021 to 2022 update as, the season slowly progresses as we get close to it, but that's for the future. For now, that is my recap of the 2021 NHL offseason.
Beautiful as always, Jurg. Beautiful as always.
Thank you. You excited for the Kraken, Chris? Gave him good grades.
I'm excited for I'm a crackhead, bro. I'm fiending for I'm fiending for the crack, bro. All right. God. Put that on a t-shirt, Jurg. Put that into the t-shirt ideas that we have from Somewhat Sports merch.
I think
hush up over there, bro. All right. Now we move on over to NBA land, where just as much noise occurred. Guys, do you have any thoughts about the NBA draft? Any winners, any losers from that end? I mean, I asked Jurg specifically because Dame is kind of uneducated in the draft field this year, particularly. But yeah, Jurg, what do you got to say about any winners and losers from the draft?
My thing with the draft, whenever you have to give out winners and losers, is kind of like, okay, how much are we projecting ahead here? Because I feel like some of these guys are going to need a few years. Like off rip, I know a lot of people have heavily criticized what OKC's done, but I understand it. I respect it. If you have an issue with their draft, like I'm not going to argue it, but I'm going to be interested to see like what this draft births from them in like a year or two time, or mainly 2 to 3 years down the line. So I want to wait on that. The Houston Rockets, I think if you have to give a winner, the Houston Rockets got high quality volume in terms of the picks they made, and a couple of the contenders made some very good draft picks late in the first round. I think we're going to talk more about this team later, but like if I'm just talking about draft only, Denver was amazing with their late first round pick, Bones Highland out of VCU. Like he's going to play such a big role early because Jamal Murray is going to miss the start of the season, but I think he's going to show early on. He's going to be very good. He's going to get those starts early, and then when he gets the transition to be a spark plug off the bench, or if he starts off the bench anyways and gets time with like Jokic and Porter Jr., I think he's going to be a very talented, like if he scores a lot. This is all based off of his scoring, like but if he puts up like 15 a game in his rookie year off the bench, maybe a 6th man of the year candidate in year one. That would be amazing if Denver had that.
Talking hot there, Jerry. Talking hot.
Hey, I mean, Ben Gordon won it in 2004 as a rookie, so it can happen. Granted, that was 17 years ago. I'm really dating myself there, but it can happen. I have hopes, but just overall, I'll say like the draft was very entertaining. A lot of surprise picks that I'm sure later the show or in future episodes we're probably going to go more into it whenever we preview the following season, like review teams and what they really did in more in depth. This is just kind of an overview, but yeah, like I'll say this, the draft was entertaining. We can't deny that.
Yeah, I agree. Some other winners or good selections, I'll say. Winners, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek type of thing. I think the Sixers stealing Jaden Springer at 28 was pretty big. It kind of gives them like a backup guard, and who knows what's going to happen with Ben Simmons to this point. A lot of people. So the Nets surprisingly had a lot of picks this draft, and so they snagged Cameron Thomas at 27. I know a lot of people were gassing that pick, and I like Cameron Thomas. I think he could be a good scorer. I just think he's a bit overrated. I think he's a bit overrated. I don't see the hype with him. I think he has the makings of a solid scorer, but it just reeks of inefficient scoring. Mm-hmm. Like I could just see this dude just shooting like 36% type things. Like he'll get his like 17 to 18 if he reaches peak ceiling, or even more than that. But I just don't see like an efficient score, to be honest. A lot of people were gassing it. I was like, take him. I honestly didn't want the Knicks taking him, so we dodged the bullet there. Josh Christopher taken by the Rockets, who was I think teammates with Jalen Green. So Josh Christopher, I think, also has a high ceiling, but I think just his year at college kind of hindered his stock.
Yeah,
Let's see here. Keon Johnson to the Clippers. I know the Knicks traded him.
that
Knicks
was a
drafted him
quality.
and then
That was a
and
quality
traded him.
pickup.
Dude, the Clippers actually had a decent draft. Keon Johnson's a solid pick. And look, I'm not a fan of BJ Boston, but him at like 53 or whatever they picked him at is pretty solid.
Yeah.
Like I didn't think he'd drop that far. So
He's gonna be a project player. Like he's probably, depending on like what the G League does this year, he's going to get time with the G League team,
yeah,
maybe a few games here and there, because Kawhi, he's gonna miss the start of the season. Paul George is probably gonna miss like maybe 8 to 12 games, all things depending. Like that's when we'll see him. So I think it was a pretty quality pickup for them. Late second round. The thing in the late second round is like very rarely do those guys become something. Like yes, you have the exceptions with like Ginobili and Isaiah Thomas, but not every draft produces it. So if you can, with the late second round pick, I always say this: just pick a project. Like pick a guy who you want to just go out there, play, and if he becomes something, he becomes something.
right, right. And I agree with you. Um, Jalen Johnson falling to 20 to the Hawks. I so before the draft, actually when the collegiate season started, I was a huge fan of Jalen Johnson. Actually, I'm just like, oh, this guy has it, bro. He's gonna be a rebounding machine. He could finish in transition. I actually liked him a lot. He was one of my favorite prospects. But then I think there was reported, well, he dropped out of Duke, and there was like reported character issues, and I'm like, ooh. I think maybe people were a little too quick to judge him because, like, okay, Duke wasn't going anywhere. He kind of dropped out. He just wanted to get ready for the draft. I'm like, I've seen that before. I wouldn't say he's like a bad kid because of it. I mean, I honestly don't know him, but it might have been a little too much baggage. But he did drop to the Hawks. I don't necessarily know how that's gonna work because the Hawks are just stacked with wings, bro. Like there was rumors that they were trying to trade Cam Reddish for a pick, and
Yeah,
then they end up getting Jalen Johnson. I mean, look, it could work out, but I don't know how much playing time he's going to get. Sharif Cooper.
oh my
Speaking
god,
of Atlanta Hawks, what did you think of the drop? I mean, he was picked at 48. Dude, there. I mean, you
we had
mocked him
him in
to the
the
Knicks
lottery.
at 20. Yeah. So here's the thing with Sharif
Way
Cooper.
off.
I think the reason why I was kind of sold on, like, for example, Sharif Cooper to the Knicks was like I bought the passing ability,
hmm
right? But there was clear cons. I understood it. He's an undersized, ball dominant point guard who can't shoot or play defense. I kind of just bought the passing, to be honest. But he dropped to 48, and honestly, as a backup to Trey Young and a playoff team like the Hawks, solid pickup for them. So yeah, I think the Hawks had a freaking really good draft in my opinion. What do you think of the Sharif Cooper drop?
I like you. Like I knew there were the cons, but I just thought of the
It
idea.
wasn't. I didn't think it'd be that bad.
Yeah, right. And not 20 plus picks. Like even aside from our mock draft, which by the way, if you haven't listened to that to get what our thoughts were on the Somewhat Sports YouTube page, like you can, we knew the cons. We knew that there were flaws, but to the right team, and that's why I want to throw this to Dame because I know Dame doesn't know the prospects in depth, but I think Dame can attest to just this idea where even though Sharif Cooper has dropped this far, Dame, for a guy who a lot of people thought could have maybe been a first round pick, and yes, there are flaws to his game. The positives he can bring to going to Atlanta, who just had their run with Nate McMillan, who usually does pretty good with his point guards, and getting to play behind Trey Young and learn a little bit with the other ball handlers and shooters on that team. Like, even though he dropped Sharif, this may have been the best thing for Sharif Cooper, Dame, because
Mm-hmm.
he's a talented player, and now Atlanta, they get the time to develop him where, yes, right now he may not be coming in hot, but in a year or two of learning with that team, he could become a very valuable like backup point guard in this league.
I mean, I know I saw in pre-draft like videos and stuff. He was being compared to Trae Young. They were like the first two players to average like 20 points and 20 and 8 assists per game in college or something like that. So that was before the draft. So bringing him next to Trae Young and having him look, not that Trae Young's like a seasoned vet, but like even if you're coming into the league as a rookie, like Trae Young's a good game to model yourself after seeing how successful he is. And I know Cooper isn't a big guard either, and clearly Trae Young isn't. So they could work off each other and learn off each other as well, which will be beneficial to them.
I mean, just the the massive difference is the shooting though. Like that's the thing. Um, Like it's I don't know. He shot like 20-something% from three. So I mean, maybe that turned a lot of people. Like Trey Young is like the quintessential example of just like, okay, we'll take a chance if like at least if you could at least shoot it, but he didn't even have that. But again, he could like he knows how to split the defense. The handle's really good, but again, 48 is steal to be honest, and like he could do a lot with that bench. He could facilitate. They just re-signed Lou Will. I think Atlanta's gonna he's that's gonna be good for him.
They
Atlanta's gonna be
needed
good
they
for him.
needed a backup passing guard,
Yes,
and they got
yes,
exactly
yes,
that. Like
yes.
the thing is, he doesn't need to shoot because the bench unit, it's going to be Lou Williams,
Yeah,
Kevin Herter sometimes off the bench, Reddish or Hunter will sometimes run with the second unit. Pick and roll action with him and Okongwu. He doesn't need to shoot the ball once. He'll get like 8 assists just off passing it to his teammates.
that's exactly why I think Atlanta's the perfect fit for him. And because there's so many shooters on Atlanta, it's gonna showcase his passing ability even more. Like I think he's already one of the best passers in the draft. The fact that he's gonna be around Herter, Bogey, Collins, Gallinari, freaking who else they got? Who else do they have?
Bogdanovich.
I think I said Bogey.
Oh, my bad.
Well, they have a bunch of shooters regardless. Cam Reddish, he has the snipers around him, and the fact that he's like one of the best passers, he'll find them easy, man. And I think he's gonna be dangerous. That Hawks bench just got deeper in my opinion. And then again, you got Jalen Johnson. So and plus, I mean the alley oop connection with Capella and Okongwu, man. You already said it, Jurg, but it's gonna be lethal, man. I think a lot of people are downplaying this pick. I was so upset that the Hawks got him. I was like, shit, bro, come on. Rich get richer. Anyway, no. Shout out to the Hawks. They actually like built appropriately. Um, Moving on. Yeah, Trey Mann. I was so upset that he went to the Thunder. I mean, shout out to the Thunder, but it was one pick away from the Knicks, and I desperately wanted Trey Mann, and I think they were gonna go with him. I think he was one of the targets, but bro, they really broke my heart that he went to the Thunder. But the Thunder get a steal in Trey Mann. I think he could. Honestly, Trey Mann, I think has top 10 potential if like he reaches his ceiling. Trey Murphy also broke my heart going to the Pelicans at 17. You attach more shooters to Zion. Moses Moody, solid pick for the Warriors. Moses Moody and Kuminga, woo, and they are showing up in summer league as we speak, bro. I'm telling you, if it's a trade package that includes all of them, it's super enticing.
Right.
If it's not, I think the foundation for their future post Curry is set, bro. I am so high on Moses Moody. Kuminga looks like a stud, and I still believe in Wiseman. To be honest, I think the Warriors are in such a good place right now. Shout out to them. Shout out to those picks. Chris Duarte before the draft, teams were fiending over this dude,
Yeah.
fiending, and I get it. He's I think arguably the best shooter in the draft. It depends on who you ask, but he's again, what is he, 24, 25, or at least 25 when the season starts. He goes to the Pacers. I think he'll come off the bench, of course, but I think he needed to be on a team like the Pacers, who are like fringe playoff team / actual playoff team.
Yeah.
He'll actually help them. But with Carlisle, I think he's in a situation in which he could thrive. You know,
Yeah. He's a
it's not
Pacer.
part-
He's honestly he's a Pacers type player. Like
yeah, I can see it.
unassuming, like sound relatively speaking, good shooter. Can like actually driving to the basket. He's a little bit underrated in that aspect. Like he
Yeah.
could take it to the rim on a few possessions here and there. So like that's a pretty and they need with the idea of what they're doing because it's going to be Levert and Brogdon. Like I know T.J. McConnell is their backup point guard, but they didn't really have a backup like shooting guard who could be
Score.
score. So I think Duarte like that fills a great need for a team that's trying to become like a real playoff contender again. Especially like we're gonna get into it here very shortly. The East they got good in the offseason.
Well, please don't bring it up. Please don't bring it up, Jurg. Not yet. But no, him and Jeremy Lamb and will provide some scoring off that bench, man. But yeah, so he is dangerous in my opinion. And the Pacers are really good pick, really good pick. Everyone is fiending over him. They got him. Good for them. So I would say this is the second biggest surprise, not the biggest surprise, but I mean, look, they've had a questionable offseason in general. I like this player. Was he too high? Of course he was. But I mean, I'll play devil's advocate. But I know, Jurg, you're gonna have a field day with this one. Josh Primo to the Spurs at 12. He was not mocked to go this high. I don't think anyone was mocking him to go this high. So I actually
James did.
Oh
James
yeah, he did.
in our
He
mock.
did. Not even that high. Like
I know. I'm messing with him.
So Josh Primo, for youngest player in the draft, I believe. Point guard. So I think the potential is there for him to be a really good shooter. I think I'm a fan of Josh Primo. I think the potential is there, and of course, him being that young, he has a lot of craftiness. Again, I believe in the shooting potential, and then him being with the Spurs at this early of an age, like I don't think he's gonna play a lot. In his first year, especially because the Spurs are kind of loaded with guards. I think he's gonna have he's a solid player, and I think he's gonna be really good for them, especially in year two when like he actually starts to play a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know. Like you have DeJounte Murray and you have Derek White. Well, I guess Patty Mills is gone, but at the time they had Patty Mills. They just signed Bryn Forbes. I didn't understand the need for another guard. I thought for sure they were going to go another center. I think you take Kai Jones in this scenario or something, or the Turkish guy. I don't remember his name, but surprise pick. I do think a lot of people are kind of, I think people should leave Josh Primo alone. It's not really his fault that he got picked this early, and good for him. He looks like a nice kid. But yeah, questionable pick. The Spurs, they had a second pick, but it was like in the 40s or later in the draft. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Josh Primo might have been taken by that time. So
Oh yeah.
I think he had to have killed their workouts or something.
So I want to throw this to Dane because this is the closest thing I heard. So while Primo has a lot of experience at point guard, the kid has grown. Like he's about 6'6", 6'7", and
He is
being one of, if not the youngest players in this draft class, there's still technically room for him to grow a little bit more. So Dame, I want to
six
throw the
four.
6'4". Well, I heard like this the doctors think he could project to grow to get even taller. Like he could be six
Okay.
seven, 6'8" by the time he's finished growing. Like potentially, I'm not saying he will be, but
Yeah.
like the idea of it is there. So like, Dame, I want to throw this to you. A lot of people are throwing Primo like to the Spurs as this was the most intense version of it I heard. And I don't think it's a fair comparison with the player, but the idea of the project of when Giannis was drafted, you knew nothing of what he was going to be, of what they could mold him to at first with Milwaukee. So the idea with Primo is that while he is a guard now, if he gets taller, if he could play a forward, but he still has the guard handling abilities, he could kind of be dynamic in what he could bring to that Spurs offense eventually for Pop. Now, not saying he's going to be Giannis. Not at all. Let me clarify that. I'm not comparing him to the two-time MVP and Finals MVP. But the idea of this kid, when he grows into his body, if he gets taller, he could be like low key that next guy. What do you think of like this? Just the overall big swing here by the Spurs, because this honestly, this could make or break what looks to be the twilight of Pop's career.
Well, it's two things. You could like the Spurs have always been such a great organization. It's kind of hard to doubt when they do
Mm-hmm.
something, especially in the draft. With all the like studs they've picked up, like when no one thought they were gonna be good. But when it comes to like hoping someone's gonna be like Giannis is once in a generation kind of guy. Like the difference between Giannis and this guy is like Giannis was 6'10", like with a wingspan of like 7'3" or whatever it was. Like you guys said he's 6'4". Like are they really gonna hope for him to grow when he's like 18, 19? Like that's kind of hard when you're drafting a guy in the 12th pick overall in the NBA draft and hoping that he's gonna grow. Like we're not in sixth grade on the AAU team, so that part of it I kind of don't really like. But who am I to doubt the Spurs and all their greatness that they've achieved throughout their years?
Yeah, I know. I know. There's been a lot of talk, especially with like their signings, like oh the Spurs are washed, and I get the skepticism, but I do think Josh Primo has a franchise point guard type of ceiling, especially for the Spurs. Like he's like a good kid, like he's a good kid, high character. He kind of fits like the Spurs like image in terms of just like what they see in a player. I think Derek White might be gone. I don't know if they like feel the same way about DeJounte Murray. I know there was a report on the Athletic that they might be shopping both guards. So I think maybe this kind of leads me to believe that that report was actually true. But I like Josh Primo. Again, taken too early, but you have to take into account that it's the Spurs. So whatever pick they make, they do it for a reason. They clearly see something in you.
If
Last
it's your
couple of
guy, it's your
years,
guy. You got to go get your guy. That's how all drafts are.
yeah. Look, last couple of years, the Spurs like evaluation of talent might have been hindered a bit. You could see it with Pop's decisions for like Team USA. So who knows, to be honest. But again, I like Josh Primo, a little high, but at this point, I'm not gonna doubt the Spurs in terms of like who they want. Again, the Spurs are an acquired taste. They always have like their flavor. So 11, Charlotte Hornets take James Booknight. Man, what a pick! Holy shit! I am so jealous of the Hornets. I think this is a team on the rise. James Bouknight and LaMelo Ball, that's the backcourt of the future. James Bouknight, I think, could be one of the best scorers in this draft. I think a lot of people are downplaying his shooting ability. I know he didn't shoot as well percentage wise, but I think he has the form. And what do we say in this podcast? Mechanics are everything. But he was shot well. I think in the combine, he was showing teams that he was actually like doing well in terms of shooting. Um, but him and LaMelo again, Malik Monk is gone. Devontae Graham is gone. I think he'll be a backup to Terry Rozier, and they just signed Ish Smith as well. So I think Bouknight, and eventually I think Rozier maybe will find a contract elsewhere, but I think Bouknight will obviously slide in to that shooting guard spot. Bro, the Hornets are going to be so exciting, man. I am such a huge fan of this pick. I'm a huge fan of Bouknight, bro. I know, like, you want him to come to the Knicks, being from Brooklyn, I think, but this team, they're going to play fast. Dude, the Hornets bench is pretty deep because I think you could slide PJ Washington, James Bouknight to the back, Kai Jones. Man, Jurg, what do you think about this? And what do you think about it for the Hornets?
The Book Night selection was pretty good, especially as we saw they ended up letting Malik Monk go. So they let Monk go and they bring in a guy on a 4-year rookie deal. Like, I like how Charlotte did it. You know, you're letting the guy go, and instead of overpaying maybe to keep him, which I technically they wouldn't have had to do, but hypothetically, with how maybe his agent would have negotiated, instead of overpaying and maybe even paying him like 6-7 mil a year, you get a guy on a rookie deal that was perfect, and then to get Kai Jones too. Like, so in a lot of the mocks prior to the draft, I saw a lot of people, guys, that mock Kai Jones to Charlotte at their initial first rounder. So when you consider the fact that they trade back in and get him late in the draft, like, they got both their guys. They got their Malik Monk replacement and the young center of the future that they hope can work with LaMelo. That's just a steal. So Charlotte, like, if you're talking about W's in the first round, like that's a pure W. And Kai Jones, potentially what he could do on that team, the center of the future, him and PJ Washington. PJ Washington, I think, is gonna have a big year 3 in hopes of getting like a big contract extension too. Like, it's gonna be interesting. This Charlotte team, man. It's gonna be, if LaMelo and Gordon Hayward are healthy for a full year, they're gonna cause teams some problems on given nights.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Just finding like a possible future center in Kai Jones. Like you already have like again, you had Bouknight, you had LaMelo Ball, you have Miles Bridges, you have PG Washington. You have every position I think booked, and then you get Kai Jones at 21. You're welcome, by the way, because you know the Knicks kind of traded with them. So yeah, shout out to them. Memphis Grizzlies at 10, picking Zaire Williams. A little bit early. But again, Jurg, we talked about this. We're kind of fans of Zaire Williams. We believe in the shot making, the shot creation. Again, it was a weird year at college, but we believe that he could be one of the best players in the draft. Actually, he solves the wing position, quote unquote, for the Grizzlies. It's going to take him a bit, but again, if he pans out like I think we both believe, then this Grizzlies team is also another team to look out for in the future. Because again, you have John Morant, you have Dylan Brooks, you have Jaren Jackson, and then they have Steven Adams now, but again, you have that wing scorer in which you could get the pressure off John Morant, which is something they actually desperately needed, especially in the playoffs. It showed a lot. But what do you think of this? I know obviously a bit early, but what do you think of him for Memphis?
Yeah, it was an early selection. Like, I think, and we kind of spoke about this on the mock draft show. Like, Zaire kind of feels like one of those players where his 1 year in college wasn't the right move for him. Like, just some guy, Gilbert Arenas has said this. Some players just don't do well in college, but then you just let them get to the pros, and that's where they're going to be a lot better. And maybe that could be the case for Zaire Williams. I think, like, the thing was, there was a lot of external circumstances with his 1 year at Stanford. Like, Stanford, of all the Division I sports schools, like, they were hit extremely difficult with the pandemic, and how it affected all their sports programs, not just basketball. Consider the fact that like essentially all their games were away. Like, they didn't really have real home games for like the first month or so of last season. And I think for himself, there may have been a personal thing happening as well. I don't think it's ever been confirmed, but like, just so many things happening to the kid externally, and for an 18, 19-year-old to deal with, like, that's not fair to completely judge him. Now, yes, there are things to work on. His shooting needs a lot of work. I think his form needs to definitely be polished up. But there are still some things that you like about, what he could do. His rebounding, I think, will be fine at the next level. Defensively, there's the potential there, and what he could do. Him and Jaren Jackson Jr. would be very, very intriguing if, Triple J stays healthy and Zaire can reach his potential defensively. So that's my mindset with it. Dan, I kind of want to throw it to you. Like, Zaire Williams, even though it's a bit higher than most would think, he's a project pick for Memphis, but like, Yeah, I guess he's a project pick, but I don't want to say he's definitely not a bust right away. He hasn't played a game yet, but they definitely have high hopes because they think he can work with Ja, and I think with Memphis that's the most important thing you can do with any acquisitions. Like, can they work with your franchise point guard?
Yeah, any wing player they could have added would have like that's a project and a young player that can grow together with Ja. Not really maybe a veteran that will try to help you win now because they're not ready to win now. Whoever they brought in, unless it was like LeBron or KD, they weren't going to win now. They need to bring in young guys to help round out that roster and help them grow together on the same like trajectory and path. When it comes to Zaire Williamson, like he has a lot. I know he has a lot of potential. I know he played with at Sierra Canyon. So I seen a couple of his high school games. I haven't really watched him in college, but I know he has a lot of potential, a lot of talent. The overall for Memphis, I didn't like the trade. I didn't like getting rid of Jonas Valanciunas for Steve Adams, but if it meant that they really wanted a guy like Zaire and trading up for him in the draft, like so be it. But yeah, I like the draft pick. I just didn't like the trade that they had to give up Jonas Valanciunas, who I thought was very vital in their success.
Understandable. All right, now move on over to the questionable pick. Questionable because of fit. The Sacramento Kings select Davion Mitchell. Now, I like Davion Mitchell a lot. I think he's one of the best guards in the draft. He's killing it in summer league right now. But I'm just like, why for the Kings? You know, I get it. Franz Wagner was taken like a pick before, but I don't know, man. I feel like there was other better options for them fit wise. Like Davion Mitchell is really good, but I also think that fit was actually important because think about it. Like the Kings have De'Aaron Fox, they have Tyrese Halliburton, and now you kind of have they have DeLon Wright as well that they just scooped up in a trade. And now you have Davion Mitchell. I don't necessarily know what this means. Obviously, he's going to be a backup to De'Aaron Fox. Do you guys think that this might be an insurance policy just in case someone requests a trade soon? What do we think, Jurg?
So it very much could be because Davion Mitchell is undersized for the two, and like I know there have been pretty successful undersized two guards before, but he's not a world class athlete like those guys. He's athletic. Don't get me wrong, like, but I don't know. It was a confusing pick. I feel like the thing is Sacramento just wanted to bring in a guy that was like a good locker room player and knows how to win type vibe, you
Results
know?
right away.
Yeah, and Davion Mitchell, he technically was that. Literally just won the national championship his last year in college. Uh, Built up a pretty good career for himself at Baylor. Back-to-back seasons on the Big 12 All Defensive Team. I think the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year this past season. So he's a good player. But yeah, no, it was kind of a confusing pick when you have Fox, you have Halliburton, who they drafted last year. Buddy Hield is still there for now, which, by the way, poor Buddy Hield. He thought he was going to be a Laker for probably 20 minutes and then still got to be a Sacramento King. I would be heavily depressed if I was him. But now adding Mitchell there, like, it's kind of like with the NFL guys, like when they say it's like, if you have three quarterbacks, you have two quarterbacks, you really have no quarterbacks. It's like, I understand the need for depth in the NBA, but like one of these guys is going to suffer due to lack of playing time.
Yeah.
So, and for all of them, Davion Mitchell is the one you could argue that could least afford it. Like Halliburton has had a year. Like sophomores always have a little slump. So if Halliburton struggles this season a little bit, it's fine. Like the league is just adjusting to him. That happens to all sophomores. If Davion Mitchell has a bad rookie season like that you start to question it because it's like there's always questions about these 4-year college players and how high their upside is. But maybe Chris, Dame, maybe what Chris is saying is right. Maybe like is Sacramento kind of hinting here that if things don't work out this season, like the next year, maybe next summer could be a time of change?
Man, it could be, but then like so this is my reaction watching the draft. I seen them picking. I'm like, why are they taking another guard? And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, it's the Sacramento Kings. What the hell did I expect? I'm expecting same thing that happened with the Cavs a couple years ago. Darius Garland when they had Colin Sexton. It's the same incompetent franchise that doesn't know what they're doing. So I wasn't after really thinking about it and realizing it's the Sacramento Kings. I wasn't really surprised at the pick because they just don't know what they're doing. I don't think that's gonna lead them to wanting to trade De'Aaron Fox, but for De'Aaron Fox himself, it's just inevitable that the time is gonna come when he's gonna request a trade, or it's gonna be this off season or next off season. Whenever it's gonna be, the time is coming. They just have to prepare themselves.
I think it's going to be next season. I think he's giving them one more year. And I understand he just re signed But I mean, at some like, what are we doing at this point? Like, you're just rotting away in Sacramento. And Davion Mitchell, look, I like him, man, a lot. I think he could shoot it. He's a great defender as well. I think the playmaking will step up in the pros, but I don't know, man. He's a win now type of player, but he's going to be behind De'Aaron Fox, in Sacramento of all places. So you got a win now player in a losing franchise. I don't a losing franchise that doesn't seem to be going uphill.
And
So
that doesn't work out, by the way. Like
never.
it's very clear. You bring a player like that. Like, yes, we all love the idea of him. We like his potential, all of that. But like a Davion Mitchell's impact will not be felt in Sacramento. If he had gone 10 picks later or 12, like to whatever good team is in the range, it'd be more felt on a team trying to push more for the playoffs. Like on the Kings, like people are going to criticize the pick, and he doesn't deserve it because he shouldn't be on that team.
I agree. I agree. Move on over Franz Wagner. Solid pick for the Magic. They get their forward that we've been asking them to get. You don't know how Jonathan Isaac is going to be post injury, but Franz Wagner, I think was a match made in heaven for them. And he adds an element of defense that they desperately need. Jonathan Kuminga falls to the Warriors. Steal because I thought he would have gone maybe top 5 essentially, but they get like top 5 potential in the draft, and I think he's going to be so good for them. Again, he's killing in the summer league right now. And now we get to, I think, not. I mean, there was a surprise earlier than that, but I guess it was the questionable pick, Josh Giddey to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Jurg, I know you have something to say about this. Look, I like Josh Giddey, and he looks like a good kid too. One of the best playmakers in the draft. Can't shoot at all, but you take off pressure from Shai in terms of just being the primary playmaker, and I know Josh Giddey will make things easier for him. But man, I feel like you could have you could have gone Jonathan Kuminga here. Add another like legitimate score to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Could you imagine Kuminga and Shai?
Oof.
Or if you wanted a point guard, why don't you just take Davion Mitchell then or something, bro? And like, because obviously Kemba Walker wasn't going to stay. So if you're going to go point guard, you just go Davion Mitchell. And I think Mitchell and Shai would have been lethal as well. I just didn't understand the pick here. It feels like such a Sam Presti move. I know Sam Presti's built from the pop tree, I think. Jurg, I don't know if that's correct. Um,
Not sure right off the top of my head.
Search it up for me if you can, but I don't know. It just seems like a Presti pick. Character I think was taken into account here because like he looks like a nice kid, but I don't know, man. I feel like you could have done a little bit more than Josh Giddey. You would have gone like a legitimate second score then, like if you wanted to take this. I mean, Shai just resigned, but I feel like Kuminga and Shai would have been perfect with each other. And then again, they got Trey Mann in the 18th pick, so there you go. And I think Trey Mann might actually be better than Josh Giddey. So yeah, I know, Jurg. What do you have to say about this?
So to confirm you, first of all, he is from the pop tree. He was with the San Antonio Spurs. Actually, reading up about his tenure with the Spurs, he is actually given a lot of credit for encouraging the team to draft Tony Parker back in 2001. So Sam Presti knows something about going after these European guards, huh? Or, well, global guards in general. Australia is not Europe, of course. Geography, ladies and gentlemen. This pick, man. I don't know if y'all saw it on either Instagram or Twitter. It was probably on like an NBA meme page or something, but it was like when it said the list of weaknesses for Giddey and it had all his weaknesses, someone retweeted it. It was like, bro, is his weakness basketball? Like, and it's like, well, he was drafted 6 overall, so it's like, I don't know. I feel like this is gonna be one of those situations where just like I'm gonna feel bad for the kid because at the end of the day, Josh Giddey did not ask to be drafted 6 overall, but now him being drafted, this is big for him, his family. Like I noted on the mock draft episode, both of his parents played in the NBLs for Australia. His dad in the NBL, his mom in the women's NBL. Like basketball literally runs in this kid's veins.
Yeah.
So he there is some natural talent there. Like you said, he's one of the best. You could honestly argue the best passer in this draft class. Truthfully, he's right up there. And the talent he brings, the height, like what he could do being a point forward in that aspect. The questions are definitely his offense and his shooting. Can he work out his mechanics a little bit shooting? Like you said, Chris, this podcast cares about mechanics. We have Dame, who is just an absolute sniper in his heyday, so Dame knows a thing or two about shooting mechanics. Dame knows a thing or two about shooting mechanics. Yep. And
Chris doesn't
Oh
though.
my god!
Tell you
Oh
that
my
much.
god!
and so when it comes to Giddey, like I don't know. Like, this is going to be a very intriguing selection. I understand. I think one of the criticisms I saw a lot, like some of my guys I personally do like other podcasts with, and like who I speak ball about, like one of their concerns is the fact that this is taking the like he could be a guy that takes the ball out of SGA's hands a lot, and then they go for Trey Mann and they double dip with the guard, so it's like another guy that's going to take the ball out of SGA's hands. Unless like it's going to be interesting to see what kind of lineup they run in OKC this
Yeah.
season because they got a lot of different ball handlers, and it's like I'm sure SGA could maybe play off ball well, but and I say this because I think at the NBA level, SGA will be better suited to be that two guard, like attacking. I think it's better to allow someone else to handle the primary playmaking abilities, be more the natural point guard. Like SGA could still get the ball, but let him be in terms of setting up plays like a floor general. I know he had Chris Paul for a year, but he's not that. That's not the player that SGA is. Maybe Giddy can become that, but then brings the question because Trey Mann, I think he could do a little bit of both, but then so can SGA. So it's like I'm really confused with what OKC did here. I feel like what they're doing is that they're just doing what you would do in like NBA 2K or like Madden, where it's just like you pick the best player available and like keep picking them, and then you're gonna trade all these guys in like two different deals for superstars, and then you just go from there. Obviously, not how it works in real life, but I mean, Sam Presti has played the last year or so of trading like a video game, so can we really be surprised? With all these draft picks. So I don't know. I'm gonna be interested to see again. Like this is why I kind of alluded to this earlier in terms of you can't grade a guy within year 1 or 2. I feel like Josh Giddey year 3 will be the year where it's like okay, he'll get the 2 years to develop. What's he gonna do from here? Honestly, if we're talking about OKC picks here really fast, I was kind of disappointed that they didn't keep the pick that was eventually used on Alperen Sengun. Like I felt
Yeah.
yeah, he's very talented. I think Houston, like he's just part of the crop that Houston got in this draft of talent with Christopher, Jalen Green, and one more player. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Um, yeah, one more player. I'm forgetting. Maybe was it Usman Garuba? They also selected, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think so. I think so, actually.
Yeah, so like you're telling me with their 4 first round draft picks, Jalen Green, Shengun, Garuba, Josh Christopher, phenomenal by Houston. So yeah, OKC, like they this is very much a pick of we got to check back in a few years. So when the Somewhat Sports podcast has become very successful and popular, we're going to have a Josh Giddey look back episode and look and see did OKC make the right pick or was Sam Presti just going for it and said screw it.
Yeah. And now we move on. I mean, this is the last thing we'll talk about in terms of the draft. And I guess we'll intertwine them. Scotty Barnes taken at 4 by the Raptors, and then Jalen Suggs at 5 to the Magic. Now there was a lot of smoke, in terms of Toronto really loving Scotty Barnes, and so I mean, immediately I thought Suggs was going to be a Toronto Raptor. I know there was a lot of smoke with Scotty Barnes, but I'm just like I don't know. Kyle Lowry's leaving. I think you could focus on that 2 guard lineup that you already ran with him and Fred VanVleet, so you just had Suggs as the starting point guard. But they took Scotty Barnes, and look, I love Scotty Barnes. I think he is amazing, man, and I like he fits the mold of what Toronto likes. They like these lengthy forwards that could defend. And again, Scotty Barnes is a Draymond Green bred. He is one of the best playmaking forwards. I think he's the best playmaking forward in the draft. He fits the mold of what Toronto looks for in players. Like honestly, Scotty Barnes, since he could handle the ball really well and since he could pass really well, he could honestly play point for them sometimes. Could you imagine a lineup with Scotty Barnes, Fred VanVleet, and or Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, and whoever their 5 is, Chris Boucher? Dude, that team is gonna be straight clamps, bro. Like, I think there is a plan with the Scotty Barnes selection. High character guy. He was so animated when he got picked. It was actually pretty dope to see. But I was yeah a little surprised, but I'm not mad at the pick. I'm not mad at the pick because I just think you still get a very good player regardless, and it kind of just goes with like how Toronto sees their players. Now Jalen sucks the Magic. They took best player available because clearly they don't care because they have like 1,800 guards at this point. Again, you have Cole Anthony, you have Jalen Suggs now, and then Markel Fultz will eventually come back.
They're going the Philadelphia 76ers route of just
Yeah,
picking everyone at one position and hoping one of them becomes their Embiid.
I mean, Suggs I think is better than all their other point guard options, but bro, I don't know. You could have gone Kuminga here, but I mean, Suggs is better. But what does it say about like your faith in Cole Anthony and then Markel Fultz when he comes back? How is he going to be the pecking order? Like you just re-signed Markel Fultz too, so uh, I can't be. entirely mad at them picking Suggs because Suggs, I love Suggs. He's one of the best players in the draft. But it's just like, ugh, why, man? And Orlando's going to be in a rebuilding process for a while. Jurg, what did you think about Toronto taking Barnes and then, of course, Magic just snatching Suggs because of it?
So funny enough, like right before we did our mock draft, we saw a couple of reports saying that Toronto would have been interested in Scotty. And honestly, like we all three of us, I'm sure we agree. Like you're talking about a kid, Scotty, he's what, 6'7", 6'8", maybe like almost 6'9". Like he was compared favorably. Like this is a realistic comparison. Like we need more realistic draft comparisons, dang it. Not these garbage comparisons that most of these guys do. But like Draymond Green was a solid comparison for Scotty Barnes coming out. That do-it-all forward, can play well on both ends, a decent playmaker. You know, if he could get his shooting up there to be better than Draymond, which is not a high bar, like, but of course he has to fix his mechanics. But if he could get his shooting better, he'll be that do-it-all forward, like not just 3-and-D, but like a 3-and-D playmaker. That I think that should be the new mold, a 3-and-D playmaker, like could pass out of, you know, cutting to the rim, or like if he's wide open, then the defense goes at him and he finds another team, like just something of that mold. And I think he could be very good for Toronto. I'm interested to see how much time he's going to get because they kept Gary Trent Jr. Now he could play the 2 or the 3. OG Anunoby plays the 3 predominantly. I'm sure he's played the 2. Maybe has he played the 4 a lot? I don't know. My game film with Toronto Raptors needs to be refreshed. But like my only concern is how are they going to figure him in? I mean, maybe if they just put him as a 6-man, that's fine. But who's there to support him on the bench unit? That's my thing personally.
When I heard the selection, I was like, does this mean they're going to trade Siakam?
That's honestly, that's what I'm thinking. So I want to throw this over to Dame here. Dame, with this pick, obviously this super high pick that the Toronto Raptors had compared to usual. What do you think personally? Like, because Masai Ujiri, I'm sure you guys saw the notification today. He just signed a what was apparently a very lengthy and lucrative extension to remain with the Raptors. So what do you think is the plan here, Dame? Like just from your perspective, because Scotty Barnes, while he's super talented and can maybe like have a player or two here right away, he needs a little bit of time. Like, I don't know if this is a playoff play by the Raptors here. I think this is just to see how this team develops in the first half of this season. And I think Masai Ujiri is just going to carry it on from there.
No, absolutely not. I don't think Masai Ujiri knows that this team isn't built to contend right now, or even not built for the playoffs. I know a lot of people thought Jalen Suggs was going to go there, but I just personally didn't see a fit there. I know if they have Fred VanVleet at point guard, they have Gary Trent they just re-signed. I just didn't see where Jalen Suggs would fit into that equation. Of course, he hasn't found the Magic either, but again, Magic, like the Kings, is just not another organization that doesn't really know what they're doing the past few years. But I really like the Scotty Barnes addition. Like, you could see what the guys at the Raptors draft. It's long, lengthy guys that have a lot of potential and that they try to grow and groom within their organization because they're really good at their player development side of things. You see that Pascal Siakam's in trade rooms as well, so you don't know what's going to happen with that. So you give yourself a little insurance policy with Scotty Barnes. Not saying it turn into Siakam, but you never know what kind of player he's going to be. He has a lot of potential and room to grow. So yeah, I obviously this isn't a playoff move or a championship contending move, but I really like the fit there. Compared to Jalen Suggs.
Yeah. All right. I mean, look, Scotty Barnes, I think is gonna be a fan favorite in Toronto, man. Like the dude is just so animated, and he's just such a hyper personality, just hyped after every play. Dude's already taking flicks with Drake. Yeah. So shout out to Barnes for going to a stable environment, and sucks for Suggs going to the Orlando Magic.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Won't be relevant for a bit. That's gonna do it for this portion of the podcast, and now we're gonna move over to part 2 where we talk about free agency. This is probably gonna split into 2 parts. So, guys, thank you for listening to our draft analysis, and catch us down the street. We'll be partying with NBA free agency news. So, peace.